All right, so we're back and ready for another deep dive, and today we're looking at the Faroes elections.
The municipal elections.
Yeah, the recent ones.
Yeah.
So you've all been following along at home, so we don't have to like go over all the basics. But
Right.
let's jump into some of the cool, like some of the stories behind the headlines.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about this election is, we had everything from, very, very close races to some landslide victories, new coalitions forming. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting just to see kind of how democracy is playing out.
Yeah. So let's start talking about Sunda Kommune.
Okay.
Eystein Zachariasen wins the mayoral seat
Right.
with List C.
Yeah. It was a big shakeup.
It was a huge shakeup. I mean,
Yeah.
former mayor Jörg von Cruz.
Didn't even come in second.
Yeah, he came in third.
Third place. Yeah.
What does that say?
Well, it says that, List C ran on a platform of really kind of, shaking things up, so to speak, particularly with some of these kind of, development projects that were happening and some of the tourism regulations that were happening.
Yeah.
So, this could mean big changes for Sunda Kommune.
Yeah.
How they approach, infrastructure and how they approach local businesses and things like that could be, dramatically different.
Yeah, that's a lot of power for one election.
It is.
And speaking of power shifts,
Yeah.
Vagi had their own little,
They did. A new mayor.
Levi Merck won.
Levi Merck, but there was a lot of drama surrounding this one.
Yeah, there was a little drama.
There was this attempt to essentially have a timeshare mayoralty
Oh, really?
where Levi Merck would be mayor for 2 years and then Maureen Gardlake would be mayor for 2 years.
Timeshare mayoralty.
So how would that even work?
It doesn't.
So you're the mayor for 2 years and then someone else is the mayor? Well, the idea was that they would, kind of share the responsibilities and...
But how do you... It's not legal.
Yeah, I would imagine that would just cause chaos.
It raises all sorts of questions about, decision-making and accountability and, just how a municipality could function with that kind of instability.
Right, because what happens if you decide something and then the next mayor is like,
Exactly.
no.
Yeah. So it was a very interesting situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it highlights the need for, clear rules and maybe a bit more political savvy when it comes to forming these kinds of agreements.
Yeah. I mean, are you seeing this timeshare thing happening in other places, or is this...
Yeah, this was a very unique situation.
That's wild.
But it was interesting to see how it played out.
Yeah. So Sunda Kommune, big changes. Vagi,
A little bit of a mishap.
Yeah, mishap, a little chaos. What else?
Well, Neskamina had a very interesting election as well.
Yeah.
Suni Yolom actually managed to double his votes from the previous election.
Really?
And he won in a landslide. That's a huge mandate.
It is, yeah. What exactly resonated with the voters in Neskamuna?
I don't know. We need to
figure that out.
do a whole nother deep dive.
Exactly.
So we got Sunda Kommune changing things up, Vagi with the timeshare issue.
To timeshare mayor.
And Neskamuna with this like
Landslide victory.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about the big one.
The capital.
The capital Tórshavn.
Yeah.
I mean,
This was an interesting one.
this was a wild election.
They formed a brand new coalition government.
Okay.
Geraldi, Javna, Arflakurin, and Borgeralistan all came together.
Now, for those of you who
Don't follow Faroes politics.
don't follow Faroes politics that close.
These are 3 very distinct parties
Yeah.
with very different ideologies.
Different ideologies, yeah.
And they all came together to form this coalition government.
So Elsa Berg from Joveldi, she's the new mayor, and she got the most votes like in all of Tórshavn.
She was the top vote getter
That's a big...
in the entire municipality.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
So,
I mean, what are the implications?
well, I think we have to really look at, what this coalition means for Tórshavn and what kind of policies they're going to put in place. Because you've got this really interesting mix of political perspectives now.
Right.
And with Elsa Berg at the helm, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
So coalitions seem to be like a big
Yeah.
theme.
And
we saw this in Klaksvik as well, right?
He did. Yeah. Klaksvik had a very close election. Folke Fluckeren actually won the most votes,
Okay.
but the other parties formed a coalition.
Okay.
So Karl Johansson, he's going to stay on as mayor,
Even though his party didn't win.
even though his party didn't get the majority.
Wow, that's interesting.
So it was a lot of political maneuvering going on behind the scenes there.
So it seems like coalitions are good in that, everyone's working together, but also like,
Right.
do you think that that's going to lead to maybe some gridlock?
Well, that's the question, isn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, it's a balancing act, right?
Right.
You want to have consensus, you want to have compromise, but you also need to be able to make decisions
Yeah.
and get things done.
And represent the people who voted for you.
Exactly. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these coalitions function in practice.
Yeah. So we got Sunda Comuna changing things up.
Mm-hmm.
Vagi with the timeshare debacle.
Some person to box.
Tosham with this like new coalition.
Brand new coalition.
Unexpected.
Unexpected, yeah. And Kloksvik.
With a coalition that's keeping the incumbent in power.
Yeah. What do you think is like the biggest takeaway from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that there's a sense of change in the air.
Yeah.
You know, these elections weren't just about choosing a new mayor. They were about communities really voicing their desires for something different,
Yeah.
for a future that reflects their, evolving needs and priorities.
And that's really exciting to see.
It is.
But I think we need to address the elephant in the room.
Okay.
This whole Sandoy stuff.
Sandoy.
The potential consolidation.
Yeah, I mean, potentially they want to just make
One municipality.
one municipality
For the whole island.
for the whole island, and the newly elected mayors of Sandur and
They're
Skokan.
both for it.
They're on board.
Yeah.
But I imagine this is a pretty,
It's a big decision.
yeah.
And there are definitely strong opinions on both sides.
I mean, what are the pros and cons here?
Well, I mean, on the one hand, consolidating resources and administration could lead to some cost savings
Okay.
and more streamlined decision making.
Right.
But on the other hand, there are concerns about losing that local representation and
Yeah.
potentially erasing the unique identities of each of the smaller municipalities.
Right, because I imagine people in those municipalities are like, well, we're our own people.
Exactly. And they want to maintain their own identity and their own autonomy.
So it's like,
It's progress versus tradition.
Yeah.
It's this debate that's happening not just in Sandoy, but in communities all over the world. How do we balance the need for efficiency and modernization with the desire to preserve local identity and autonomy?
that's the question,
It is a big question.
with no easy answers.
No easy answers.
We're going to come back after the break, and we're going to keep talking about this.
Yeah.
This is fascinating stuff.
It is fascinating.
All right, we'll be right back.
So, in the midst of all this talk about, coalitions and consolidations, there's another important aspect of these elections that I think we need to examine, and that's, the role of Geoff Stowe.
Right, Jelstada, for those who maybe aren't as familiar,
Yeah,
that's the movement for gender equality in the Faroe Islands.
exactly.
And from what I gathered, the election results weren't exactly a win.
They weren't. Unfortunately, while we did see some strong female candidates emerge victorious,
Yeah.
Elsa Berg and Torshavn being a prime example, the overall representation of women in elected positions remains, disappointingly low.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of concerning.
Oh,
What do you think are some of the factors that are contributing to this?
well, it's a complex issue, right? There's no easy answers.
Right.
Some people argue that it's a matter of, societal norms and expectations.
Right.
Others point to, systemic barriers within the political system itself.
So it's not just about encouraging women to run for office.
No, it's about creating an environment where they can thrive
Yeah.
and succeed once elected.
Right. I mean, things like campaign financing,
Exactly.
childcare support,
All of those things.
having a culture within a party that's supportive.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's so many different factors.
It's a multifaceted approach
Yeah.
to achieving true equality.
So I want to go back to something that you said earlier, and I think it's a really good point, talking about these coalitions, and you were saying there's a potential for gridlock.
Yeah, the double-edged sword of collaboration, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can have greater consensus, you can have compromise, but it also makes decision-making a lot more complex and potentially more time-consuming.
Right, because you have so many different voices at the table.
Exactly.
And especially when you consider how diverse ideologically some of these coalitions are. Right. Take Klaksvik, for example. You have Chodaveldi, Javnarflokkeren, and Sjálvstýri
Yeah, and they're all
all working together,
very different.
despite having, different perspectives on various issues.
So what kind of compromises do you think had to be made in order for that coalition to form?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
Are they going to be able to find common ground, or are they going to get bogged down in these ideological debates?
Right, because ultimately they have to be able to govern.
Exactly. And the success or failure of these coalitions is going to have a significant impact on the future of Faroese politics.
Right. And I think that's something that we're going to be watching very closely.
And speaking of watching things closely, I mean, we can't forget about Vagi
Oh, Vagi.
and the the timeshare mayor debacle.
It was a very unique situation.
Yeah, and it just kind of goes to show that, even in a place like the Faroe Islands where you think, okay, municipal politics, it's pretty straightforward.
Right.
But it can get really messy.
Oh, absolutely.
And complicated.
And it highlights the need for clear rules and regulations, to ensure stability and accountability within the system.
So we got coalitions forming potential mergers. Right. A reminder that local politics can be very dramatic.
Very dramatic.
I mean, this has been a whirlwind of an election season.
It's testament to the vibrancy of Faroe's democracy, though.
Yeah.
These weren't just elections. These were opportunities for communities to really express their hopes and their concerns and their visions for the future.
And what a future it's going to be. I mean, so many new leaders, new coalitions.
New ideas.
It's going to be really exciting to see.
Exciting and uncertain.
Yeah.
But that's what makes politics so dynamic.
Right. And it's always evolving.
It's a process.
And as engaged citizens, we need to stay informed.
Absolutely. Hold our elected officials accountable.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
All of it.
So before we move on, did you hear about the voter turnout in some of the smaller municipalities?
Oh, you mean the ones where the voter turnout was nearly 100%?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite remarkable.
What do you think caused that?
Well, it could be a variety of factors, right?
Yeah.
It could be a particularly contentious local issue. It could be a sense of community pride.
Yeah.
Maybe even just a little bit of friendly competition between neighboring villages.
Right.
Who knows? But it's heartwarming to see that kind of engagement.
Yeah.
In a world where apathy and cynicism often seem to prevail.
I think that's a great point. I mean,
it's a reminder that democracy really thrives when people feel connected to their community.
Yeah.
When they believe that their voices truly matter.
And their vote matters.
And their vote matters.
Yeah, it really is inspiring to see that kind of turnout, that people still care about their communities. But what else I find inspiring is just like the sheer diversity of experiences in these elections. I mean, you have, seasoned politicians holding on to power.
Right.
And then you got these like brand new faces bringing all this like new energy.
Yeah, it's a reflection of Faroe society itself,
Yeah.
We often think of the Faroe Islands as this, homogenous kind of community. But when you really look at it, each municipality has its own distinct political landscape.
Right.
Its own priorities, its own, approach to governance.
And it's so easy to get caught up in like the national narrative.
Right.
But these local elections really show that, change happens.
At the grassroots level.
Yeah.
Community by community.
And that's where it matters the most.
Exactly. Whether it's, a new development project in Sunda Kommuna or, a revitalized cultural initiative in Ness Kommuna.
Right.
Or, a push for greater gender equality in Torshavn.
Yeah.
These local initiatives really shape the daily lives of Faroe's citizens.
And it's not just about the policies.
No.
It's about the people who are implementing those policies.
It's about the people who are now responsible for translating those campaign promises into tangible action.
And that's a huge responsibility.
It is a weighty responsibility.
Yeah. So before we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay.
We've seen these coalitions, we've seen these potential mergers, calls for greater equality. But looking beyond like the immediate outcomes of these elections, what do you think is going to be the lasting impact?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think these elections mark a turning point.
Okay.
For the Faroe Islands, they signal a shift in the political landscape, a growing desire for change, and a renewed sense of engagement from the Faroes people. The seeds of transformation have been planted.
I like that.
And it will be fascinating to watch them grow in the years to come.
And, it's up to all of us to stay informed.
Absolutely.
To hold our leaders accountable.
Participate in the conversation.
Yeah, and just to continue to be engaged in, shaping the future that we want to see.
The future's being written right now.
Yeah. So that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Stay curious, stay engaged, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.